What's up, y'all? Welcome to 2nd and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast presented by Old City Sports Network, the best network for all your Philadelphia sports needs. It's your host, Michael Roscoe. After a nail-biter of a game, the Eagles rally in the fourth quarter after not scoring at all in the first three to get the win 15-12 in an anxiety-inducing, heart-racing showdown. We'll talk about that game and how we overcome from injuries, plus look into the second consecutive year in which we play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the regular season. This episode, the entire 2nd and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast, and the Old City Sports Network are sponsored by Righteous Felon Craft Jerky. Use promo code OCSN for 15% off your order at righteousfelon.com. We are also brought to you by SeatGeek. Use promo code Old City Sports Network, all one word, for $20 off your purchase. 2nd and 15 and Old City Sports Network are also brought to you by Decals by Aaron and Warlord Beard Oil. Head on over to warlordbeardoil.com. Use promo code OLDSPORTS for 15% off your beard oils, lotions, apparel, and so much more. And finally, please support the entire network by heading on over to oldcitysports.com. Head on over to our merchandise tab and use promo code OCSN for 15% off your purchase of some awesome 2nd and 15 gear. All right, let's dive into this Eagles news and discussion, starting with the game overview of Week 3, Philadelphia Eagles versus New Orleans Saints. I don't think this team will ever have a win where it wasn't actually emotionally and physically damaging to Eagles fans. Someone took a pic of their Apple Watch, warning them of a highly accelerating heartbeat and to be cautious. If that photo doesn't sum up what it's like to be an Eagles fan, then I don't know what does. After some questionable decisions from Nick Sirianni, including 2 failed fourth down conversions and a 60-yard try for Jake Elliott, the fourth quarter has a score of 3-0 with the Saints on top. The Eagles do get a stop on 4th and 1 in their own territory and take advantage of it, leading to a 65-yard rushing touchdown by Saquon Barkley. Finally, a touchdown gets on the board in this game, and the Eagles take their first lead of the game 7-3. However, like a lot of Eagles games, this would be short-lived. The Saints would make a field goal of their own, shortening the lead by 1, but however, on a 4th and 11, instead of punting, Sirianni called for that field goal, which missed, and New Orleans took over on their own 46-yard line. After a 29-yard pass from Derek Carr to Chris Olave, the Saints would get into the red zone where Carr would find Olave again for a touchdown with 2 minutes and 10 seconds left. The Saints would try a 2-point conversion, but the Eagles defense, which has been on fire against the run all day, prevents that, and we got ourselves a 12-7 game. Now, I know what you're thinking. 2 minutes left, a Jalen Hurts drive. Hasn't been great so far. This is where it gets different. Under 2 minutes left, it's 3rd and 16. Jalen Hurts finds Dallas Goedert for a 61-yard pass and catch, putting the Eagles in the red zone, which would lead to the 4-yard rushing touchdown by Saquon Barkley. He would also make that 2-point conversion, and the Birds are on top by 3. The Saints, on the second play of their final drive, Derek Carr is under pressure, gets the ball off in the middle, and it is picked off by Reed Blankenship to ice the game. The Birds would get the upset over the Saints, 15-12. Jalen Hurts would go 29 for 38 for 311 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Saquon Barkley would finish the game with 17 carries for 147 yards, with 2 TDs and 4 receptions for 9 yards. one of the unsung heroes of the game, Dallas Goedert, would put up an incredible 10 catches out of 11 targets for 170 yards, the most by a tight end in Eagles history in a single game. All right, before we get into discussions, overreactions, all that jazz, we saw what happened in that game. We got some injury updates. As y'all know, A.J. Brown has been dealing with the hamstring injury, and in last week's game, Devontae Smith and Lane Johnson both suffered concussions. All three were labeled DNP, did not participate for Wednesday's walkthrough practice. Offensive lineman Mekhi Becton and Landon Dickerson have been dealing with a finger and wrist injuries. They were both at limited practice on Wednesday's practice, and Landon Dickerson was wearing a brace on that wrist. Wide receiver punt returner Brayton Covey ended up suffering a broken collarbone and was placed on IR, expected to miss anywhere from like 6 to 8 weeks, I think. And finally, we had Darius Slay on this injury report. Turns out that push out of bounds created a knee injury. I'll go more into that situation later. However, some good news, he was a full participant for this practice. All right, let's dive into discussions, overreactions, and thoughts for this Week 3 game. Starting with the offense. I'm starting to see the central theme with this offense, which is starting off with a struggle and ending with an improvement for a game-winning drive. After putting up only 41 rushing yards and 150 passing yards, plus no points in quarters 1 through 3, to go and then put up 15 points, 131 rushing yards, and 138 passing yards in the second half alone, that was incredible. We lost several key players due to injury, as I mentioned above. All those guys left before the fourth quarter, and honestly, at that point, I thought we were done. But our guys, they stepped up, especially Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert. Why this offense has not been using Dallas Goedert the way we did in this week in the first two games, it's baffling. Dallas Goedert has always been an effective tight end. If you look at his route running in that game, he's able to create a lot of separation and get open for massive yards after catch. Also, on those screens, he's able to rush through the opening provided for him very effectively. Also, Saquon proves again why you need to give him the ball. It's not a hard concept, y'all. 147 rushing yards and 2 TDs. He now leads running backs both in touchdowns and rushing yards on the season. Thank you, Saquon, for saving us this game. This offense was in next man up mentality, and it showed. When Tyler Steen stepped in for guard, with 35 snaps, he did not allow a single pressure, quarterback hit, or sack. Tackle Fred Johnson had some huge holes to fill with Lane Johnson, and he did a tremendous job as well. One thing I really liked was on that 3rd and 16, which would result in that 61-yard catch, it was an audible called by Jalen Hurts. It pays to be able to read the defense. He was able to do so, and it paid dividends. Also, shout out to Jahan Dotson for setting up an excellent block on that screen for Dallas Goedert in order for that to be successful. But back to Jalen Hurts. I know what y'all are thinking. Again, with the turnovers. He leads the league in turnovers going into week 4. It is a problem, I agree. But still, we won the game despite losing the turnover battle in 2 games now. I don't want that to become a trend at all, but it should reflect the capabilities of what Jalen can do in regards to making up for mistakes mid-game. He really needs to clean these turnovers. Don't get me wrong. It's getting redundant at this point. But let's look at his other numbers. Right now, he has the highest winning percentage of quarterbacks since 2022, and currently he's tied for 4th in total passing yards, 4th in quarterback rushing yards, 3rd in first down completions, and 9th in pass completion percentage this year, which that is above Patrick Mahomes. Now, there are categories he's lower in, such as passing touchdowns, but he's had higher than a 76% pass completion rate and an 88 or higher rating in both of the last 2 games. His number 1 problem is turnovers, with the number 2 problem being a toss-up between reading the defense and the speed of decision-making. But that second problem he's been improving on, slowly but steady over these last 2 games. Clean up those turnovers, you're back in the top QB conversation. Let's not overlook or undervalue the good that Hurts has been doing. We've seen this shit before with Dak Prescott and Josh Allen over the past couple of seasons. Both have been turnover machines, yet continue to get their other accolades recognized and be considered great to elite quarterbacks. Jalen is reaching that range with his current year accolades. If he didn't have this turnover problem, he'd be in that top 5 contention conversation already. If he cleans over these damn turnovers, he will be in the top 5 contention. Overall, I loved how much this offense stepped up in the end of that game, but I would love to see this offense more consistent throughout the entire game, especially with play call decisions, but that's in another topic later in the show. People will have more confidence in us if our wins are not, quote, squeaking by. We play consistently over the rest of the season, actually use our tight end and running back as weapons with the talent that they bring, we can start winning games by double digits again. All right, with this defense, wow. What a difference 1 week has made. Last week, I was ripping this defense apart because the pass rush, let alone the entire defense, was nowhere to be found. Despite the first 2 offensive drives from the Saints making the defense look like Camp Green Lake once again, after that, they held the number 1 offense in the league going into that game to 12 points, less than 220 total yards, and stopped the Saints in 2 out of their 3 red zone trips, a huge improvement over last week. Jalen Carter was absolutely phenomenal. 3 pressures, 2 hurries, 1 quarterback hit, and 2 pass deflections. Pass deflections from a D tackle? It went crazy. This line was able to keep Alvin Kamara to 3.1 yards per carry, 89 total rushing yards, and 0 touchdowns. Jordan Davis got the team's sole sack against Derek Carr. Zach Bond continues to be dominant in tackling, now leading the NFL in total tackles. They came to play, especially on that 4th and 1, shutting down the run and turning the ball over on downs. Our safeties and our linebackers came up and made plays preventing any huge gain on the outside. C.J. Gardner-Johnson had a much better game considering the criticism he faced, some of which from me, honestly, over his first 2 game performances with missed tackles. Quinyon Mitchell continued to showcase his talent with 2 pass deflections and 4 total tackles. And then you got Reed Ghost Blankenship to ice the game with that interception. I'm telling y'all, this man is good at reading the quarterback and the routes. The defense looked like one cohesive unit, something we did not see at all last week. Fangio outcoached the number 1 offensive coach in football right now. That defensive performance is what I believe a lot of people expected to see when we made the coaching and player changes over the preseason. It took a couple of games to get there, but they just showed the NFL what they're capable of. Some people say that, this was a fluke game for the Saints. It doesn't really reflect their performance. It doesn't show that the Eagles have a good defense. Saints will perform better in future games. But instead, I think this performance made a lot of people bite their tongues when talking bad about the Eagles' defense. If this defense performs like they did throughout the rest of the season, we're golden. All right, next I want to talk to y'all about Sirianni's decision-making. Not saying it's good decision-making, just clarifying that now. I'm getting more and more confused by this man each and every week. He admits that on the 4th and short plays, he was the one who made the decision to run the ball instead of taking the points. We had 2 opportunities to take points, yet his calling prevented that, and when he decides to take points, he has Jake Elliott try it from 60 yards for his first kick attempt of the game. It's no wonder how he missed. Yes, Elliott has made longer field goals than that, but I wouldn't want to warm up with a 60-yarder. That's ridiculous. I'm still skeptical of Nick, yet he was able to get his coaching staff together to help put on a winning performance. If his decisions cost them the game, there would likely be serious conversations about his departure. He was in the hot seat going into this game to begin with, and the only thing that slightly saved him this week was the fact that the team won. I mentioned last week how I wanted him off the field. Now I really want his ass off the field. Nick, just be there for the moral support for the team at this point and do your due diligence as a head coach. Quit overriding and interfering with calls from Kellen Moore. He knows what he's doing. Have there been a few questionable calls? Sure. but this offense is looking hella better than it did last season. And what we saw from the end of the game with the play callings and missing a lot of our superstars, but also succeeding, Kellen Moore is capable of winning games with his play calling. He listens to his players when they tell him what they see / like and what they don't, and he listens to them. Saquon confirmed this in a press conference. He has confidence in his players to make last-minute audibles prior to the snap. We saw it on that 3rd and 16 play. Kellen Moore isn't the offense's problem. It continues to be Nick Sirianni. This ain't the same offensive scheme or players from 2 years ago. Leave Kellen Moore the hell alone and let him do his job. The Saints OC Clint Kubiak is seeing a shit ton of success because he's left in charge of the offense. He's making the calls with, I'm pretty sure, little to no interference from the head coach or anyone else. Kellen is the offensive mind this year, and Nick really needs to back off. All right, before we go into the Week 4 preview, I want to talk about the Saints and their dirty plays. This might be controversial to some, probably Saints fans, but y'all, I was livid with that team after the game and with the refs on the Devontae Smith injury. When Smith made the catch and was getting pushed back at least a couple yards, forward progress had already been established, and with 2 players holding him up, the ref should have blown the play dead at that point. Plus, with Devontae Smith going backwards, why the fuck would a player like Christian Boyd make a hit to propel him forward? It doesn't make sense. I know he's trying to get the tackle, but bro, he was already going down. Even with the play not being called dead, Boyd made a dirty, cheap shot, and his ass should be fined, which, now that I think about it, I wrote that before I figured out he was fined $4,600. Not enough, though. Some people are trying to say it wasn't a shot to the head, it was a clean play, blah, blah, blah. First of all, it was not a clean hit. Boyd leaned in with his head, and it was at the very least in Devontae's head neck area. How the fuck else would Smith's helmet have popped off? To top it all off, you got Peyton Turner spitting. Yes, spitting. Not bars, actual spit on Devontae's unconscious, motionless body. People try to deny it, but you can see it in the close-up view. Peyton Turner gets up and then spits in Smith's direction while looking down on him like garbage. Those two are absolute scumbag players. Fuck that whole team at this point. To top it all off, you got Darius Slay being pushed out of bounds and into the bench by Saints lineman Trevor Penning. Penning, you know where the out of bounds line is. And you know damn well that the bench is far the fuck away from that. You did that shit on purpose, so fuck Trevor Penning too. Despite all this dirty shit from the Saints, all within a quick span of one another, no penalty was called. Are you fucking joking? If these cheap shots occurred against a team like, I don't know, the Kansas City Chiefs, there would be at least 7 flags on the field at once. Not one damn penalty called by these refs, especially on the Devontae Smith hit. So much for player safety, right? It was crystal clear. A hit to the head and not one ref called that? It was in plain sight. Absolutely disgraceful from the refs. 5 Eagles players exited that game from injury. If it doesn't happen by the time this episode airs, I hope Penning, Boyd, and Turner all get fined, and Turner gets his ass suspended. Absolutely unsportsmanlike and bitch-made moves by all 3 of those bums. All right, y'all, let's dive into this Week 4 preview. The Birds go on their 3rd road game of the year, this time heading to Tampa, Florida, to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is if the Hurricanes don't interfere with the game. I really don't think they will. I'm not a meteorologist, though. The Eagles will likely have several key players out, including both top wide receivers in Brown and Smith, punt returner Britton Covey, and tackle Lane Johnson. Our wide receiver core will likely be Jahan Dotson, Paris Campbell, and Johnny Wilson. Obviously, we'd love to have the starters in there, but we saw what our offense did with that next man up opportunities. We can hope for the same from our receiving core. The Eagles are coming into this game banged up, but they're also fired up and in search of revenge as the Bucs beat down our Birds in last year's wildcard game. The Bucs are coming off a bad 26-7 loss against the Broncos, and are looking to bounce back, but are also coming into this game banged up. They possibly could not have all-pro safety Antoine Winfield. He could be back as he was expected to miss only 2 weeks with a foot injury. However, some reports say he'd realistically be out anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, which means he'd be out this game. Regardless, our offense should be prepared to play with him on the field. Now, here's what I think we need to do to secure a win against the Bucs. Starting with the offense. I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point. It's so obvious, yet apparently not. Utilize the run game and give Saquon the ball. The Bucs struggled against the run last week, allowing quarterback Bo Nix to rush for 47 yards and running back Tyler Batty to achieve 70 rushing yards. He had 16 in the previous week. Saquon is an elite running back, and even if we have Mekhi Becton and Lane Johnson out, which it's looking more like we may have Mekhi Becton back, we saw what Fred Johnson and Tyler Steen can do, and we can count on them to help create the holes for Saquon to get through. It could be challenging if Vita Vea plays. He's an absolute beast at nose tackle. However, he missed last week with a grade 2 MCL sprain after being downgraded from doubtful to out. He's listed as questionable so far, I believe, going into week 4. But regardless, Barkley will be able to have a field day up the middle if our O-line can hold those blocks just long enough. Plus, we saw him do this against arguably a better defensive line, considering all injuries and things like that. So in theory, Barkley can have similar results against Tampa. Just don't wait until the second quarter to give him his first carry. Speaking of Saquon, my next thought on securing the win is to utilize Barkley in curls, hitches, and screens. The Bucs had a hard time in man coverage, and a hitch route from Bo Nix to Javonte Williams set up Bo Nix for a rushing touchdown in the first quarter. You get a tight end like, Dallas Goedert or Jack Stoll, now that he's signed with us, out in front to block, and it's going to open up the field for big carries. With the wide receivers, let's switch things up a little bit. I know we're running thin, but we have Jahan Dotson, who had 11 touchdowns last year, even though his production's been a little slow so far. And we also have a 6'6" receiver, Johnny Wilson. Mix things up. Throw Wilson in the slot receiver every now and then or so. He can get separation in the middle, and even if he's covered, he's got significant reach advantage and can catch a high pass that would be difficult for defenders to win that battle. With Dotson, he typically plays in the slot, but he is quick, and Tampa's corners were getting beat very often on the outside deep routes by Cortland Sutton, Josh Reynolds, and company. You can have Dotson, Campbell, Wilson, even John Ross, now that he signed to the practice squad. You could elevate him and use his speed to our advantage. He's just got to catch the ball. With the defense, it's plain and simple. Replicate exactly what they did against the Saints. Baker Mayfield was sacked a whopping 7 times against a Broncos rush defense that ranks 21st in the league. The Bucs were without starting right tackle Luke Godeke, which gave the Broncos an advantage. However, even if Luke plays, he'll face Brandon Graham, Bryce Huff, and Nolan Smith. I know that Huff hasn't done much, but with that amount of rotation of players on that edge position lining up against Godeke, it's going to keep him working all night long and tire him out. If the pass rush replicates exactly what they did, and Fangio even sends a linebacker or a safety blitz, especially on crucial third down plays, I could see Baker having a hard time under pressure and making mistakes. All right, let's look into some predictions. I'm going to tell y'all real quick. I am predicting a win for the Birds this week. Last week, I was doubtful and I lacked confidence, and for that, I apologize to Eagles fans and the Eagles community. They definitely proved me wrong. I can see this momentum from this win going for the Birds as they seek revenge into week 4. I don't think it'll be a super high scoring game considering all the injuries. I think they'll cover the spread, and I could see it being a 21-17 win for the Birds. I gotta predict it closely considering our track record of wins by 1 possession. I think Saquon will have another big game, especially if he's actually utilized in the first quarter. I can see at least 90 rushing yards and at least 1 touchdown. I can see Jalen getting a rushing touchdown from 10 yards or under, And then it's finally time for Dallas Goedert to get into the end zone. So I predict he'll have the Birds' third touchdown. He showed up and balled out against the Saints. He deserves to get a touchdown. All right. I'll end this with some final thoughts. We saw what 1 week can do. We made a lot of mistakes against the Falcons, but we made up for them against the Saints. One of the best teams going into that game. You could argue that, the Saints are fraudulent, whatever, but they put up 91 points against a team that just beat down the Raiders. Granted, they had Bryce Young, I know, but they also beat Dallas Cowboys, who haven't been performing as well, but historically perform well in the regular season. So this Eagles team is capable of making improvements, learning from mistakes, and performing exceptionally well. Yes, there were mistakes, but you can't discredit the good things that happened. Jalen Hurts putting up over 300 yards. The defense looking absolutely unstoppable. Not allowing the Saints to score until the fourth quarter. We can replicate those actions against this Bucs team. I think there's some focus on, we need to survive the season. We need to survive the week. That should be our focus. Because week 5, we have a bye week. In the beginning, I thought, that's kind of weird. It's a little too close. We're going to have a shit ton of games afterward. But with all these injuries, it's now a blessing in disguise. This will give at least 3 weeks for Devontae Smith and Lane Johnson to recover from their concussions. By week 6, A.J. Brown should be healthy and good to go. We'll have a lot of our offensive weapons back for the harder games the rest of the season. Not saying that this game won't be hard, but we are given a little grace with that early bye week. We showed the NFL what we are capable of in that game. We just need to be consistent and replicate that going into these next games. We're tired of being called fraudulent. We're tired of, being seen as the underdog and not being taken seriously. We just showed up and showed the NFL what we're capable of. So, Birds fans, we got this. All right, y'all, that is it for this week's episode. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow us on YouTube, X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok by searching at 2nd and 15. That's 2NDAND15, or by the full name 2nd and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast. You can also find the audio for each and every single episode releasing Thursday mornings on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Player FM, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see y'all next week, the last game before we head into that early bye week. Don't forget to stay fly like an eagle, and as always, go Birds!